Tonight we're going to finish out Revelation 18, and I want you to remember that this destruction of Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots, is not a natural disaster. It won't be a volcano. It's going to be an act of war, because Revelation 17 and verses 16 and 17 says, "The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire." We learned also that this chapter 17 tells us that those 10 horns are 10 kingdoms. That was Revelation 17. And Revelation 17:17 says, "For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled." So God's put it in their heart. They're going to do this deed of bringing judgment upon the Babylon, Mystery Babylon. And so I want you to remember too, that 3 times in Revelation 18, this says that it's going to happen in 1 hour. Verse 10 of 18:10, it says, "For in 1 hour is thy judgment come." Verse 17 says, "For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught." And verse 19 says, for at the end of that verse it says, "For in 1 hour she is made desolate." So 3 times it tells you it's in 1 hour. We talked about this as an appointed time for her destruction. And the other thing is 3 times it talks about that she's burned. 3 verses talking about, we read there in Revelation 17, but in Revelation 18 it talks 3 times that she's burned. She's going to burn. She's going to burn. And verse 8 it says, "She shall be utterly burned with fire." That was Revelation 18:8. And it says in verse 9, it says, "The kings of the earth who have committed fornication and have lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament her when they shall see the smoke of her burning." And it says in verse 18, "And cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, what city is like unto this great city?" So 3 times in that chapter we talk about the burning. We know that. Now, Brother Albie, last week you pointed out, and I'm so thankful, I want to re-emphasize it again, that they are watching her. All these people are watching. This is before the coming of the Lord. This happens when people are just standing back and watching her destruction. Do you see that? It's kind of like 9/11. Do you remember seeing the reports and seeing those towers? They replayed it. Everybody saw the airplanes going into those towers and watched it burn and how it came down. That's the way it will be with this destruction. Because when we get into Revelation 19, we'll talk about the coming of the Lord. This is before that. So this is not the end. Yeah.
Could it be one of the trumpets?
I think so. I think it's the second one. Because if you look at Revelation 8, Brother Abby said, could this be one of the trumpets? And in chapter 8, I look and I see verse 8, Revelation 8:8. It says, "The second angel sounded, as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood." The reason why I believe it turns to blood is because there'll be so many people. This is a great city. There's a lot of people there, and it is going to cause the sea to turn to blood. And another thing is an act of war of this kind of a devastation. To me, only an atomic bomb or a nuclear bomb could be capable of such utter destruction. So I'm going back into Revelation 18 here, and it says there's 3 groups of people that are weeping and wailing. We have the kings. You'll see in verse 9 it says the kings of the earth. They're the ones it says shall bewail her and lament her. See, there's the kings. And then you look again at verse 11. We see the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her. And verse 15, it says, the merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. So you got the kings, you got the merchants all crying, weeping, wailing, and then you have also the shipmasters and the sailors. We see that in verse 17, every shipmaster and all the company and the ships and sailors, as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. And verse 18, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning. You see that three groups of people that are watching and wailing as they see this take place. And so we read last week, verse 20, it says, rejoice over her, thou heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And we see at the end of this chapter, in verse 24, it says, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. So this judgment is coming because she's a killer. She's killed a lot of people, the saints and the prophets. And we see that this also fulfills the 5th seal in Revelation chapter 6. It says, Revelation 6 and 9 says, and when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And then it says, verse 10, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And verse 11, it says, and white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet a little season until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. So we see that seal, 5th seal, open, and they're saying, how long? But we see that it is taking place at the judgment of this whore, this harlot, this mystery Babylon. Okay, and so tonight we're going to start at verse 21. That was just recapping what we've talked about. It says, Revelation 18 and 21, and a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. Now, he's giving you a likeness here. And quite honestly, I understand that millstones are like if you went to a mill where they professionally mill the wheat or other grain to make flour of, they would have a huge setup. In what I call the olden days, they put them by rivers of water where the waters turned the wheel, and that turning of the wheel turned the millstone. I've never been there to any of those places. I just know that that's how they did it. And nowadays we have machinery that do the grinding. But in the old days, they had millstones. And very often it was a beast of burden that turned.
Like Samson.
Yes. I looked that up to see if it mentions millstone in the telling of what happened to Samson. Samson was a very mighty man. And when the Philistines overtook him, all his power was in his hair. And Delilah says, "Tell me, where is your power?" And he gave in and told her it was in his hair. When they cut off his hair, then he lost his power. And those Philistines poked out his eyes, blinded him, and they set him in the prison house, and it says to grind. And I just pictured this man was forced then to turn the wheel of a millstone. And this is an analogy. This is how Babylon is going to be thrown down into the sea. It's not a millstone. It's like a parable. It's symbolizing how she's going to be taken, and she is not going to be found no more at all. She's going to disappear off the map. Have you ever seen any kind of destruction like that? I haven't. If you go to Nagasaki or Hiroshima, those two places, that's what ended World War II is those atomic bombs. But those places are still on the map. They're there. This, I believe, is going to sink into the sea. I just think that that's why it talks about the water turning to blood. And I think in the nuclear aspect of it, it will continue to burn. And what I wanted to point out to you here too is there, in the next few verses, it talks about no more at all. No more at all. And the first one is in verse 21, Babylon, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. You see that? And the next verse it says, and the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. So no more music. No more music in that place. And then it continues, it says, no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. You see that? And the sound of the millstone. No more grinding. The sound of the millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. Do you see that? Now, that was 4. Verse 23 says, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the next one, last one here, it says, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. Do you see how conclusive that is? It's just telling you repeatedly, no more, no more. And then it says, there's a colon there, no more at all in thee. In verse 23, it says, for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Great men, I hate to name names, but there are some men in this world that are great. And when I say great, I mean that they are super wealthy. People that control some of the media. They control politics. They control computer land, you know, all those aspects of it. Merchants, when I think of merchants, I think Amazon is probably the wealthiest by far in the merchants. Sorceries is witchcraft. And the kingdom that this Mystery Babylon has been riding on is a kingdom of darkness. It's witchcraft. It's the devil's work. And it says, "For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived." You know, it is so easy to be caught up in things. George was talking to one of those men working on the power lines that were down there, and that young man was saying they'd been on the job since 2:30, and this was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's more than 12 hours, more like 16 hours on the job. And he asked, "Aren't you tired?" And he said, "I love the money. I love the money." Do you see, there is an attitude of getting that people have, and it's so easy for everyone to buy into it. And it's dangerous, very dangerous. And verse 24 ends, Revelation 18, it says, "For in her was found the blood of the prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth." That's a terrible thing. The innocent blood is something that God hates. He hates it, the shedding of innocent blood. We're going to go into Revelation 19 here shortly, so that is the end of Revelation 18.